Hello everyone. Today let us see the practical explanation of variable naming conventions. Before that, as a first step, let us get into the Python interpreter, or I can say it as Python shell. Either you type Python or the version specifically so that you will be getting into the Python interpreter. So here you can observe this prompt shows that you are in the Python shell. So inside this Python shell, we can write our Python script and we can execute it. First, let us see how we can declare a variable. Suppose if I want to use or if I want to store a student name, I can directly write the name like this. This is the name of a variable followed by, I can assign a value to it. I'll be assigning a name called as Ram to the variable called as student. This is valid. What the rules of variable says is, your variable can consist of the letters. This is what I have mentioned. And it can consist of underscore and it can also consist of numbers. Here, everything which I have stored is alphabets and it is a valid declaration. If I execute this, say it is executing without throwing any error. So if I wanted to print that, if I type student, it is giving the value which is stored into that particular variable called a student. And the value is Ram. Similarly, this is consisting of only alphabets. Suppose if I want to store or if I want to store an integer value in it, that is also possible. We already know about it. And variable name can also consist of numbers. Here I can use student 123. So that means I'm storing the 123rd student's details. So I can use even numbers along with, I can say, the variable declaration. Ram, I'll be storing into this student 123. I have specified it as student variable name. Now, if I type student 123, it is also a valid declaration. You can just get a value called as Ram. So that means what I wanted to convey here is a variable declaration can consist of letters and it can also consist of numbers. One more declaration which I told us, a student underscore 123 is also valid. That means what I wanted to say here is your variable declaration can also have underscore. Whatever the value you are supposed to store inside that, you can store, you can run it and see, say it is not throwing any error. That means it is a valid declaration. That means any variable declaration can have letters, it can have underscore, and it can have numbers. No special character is allowed inside your variable name. Suppose if you are trying to create a variable with a special symbol, let us assume special symbol which I am assuming here is at. So if you want to create a variable name with a special symbols, if you are trying to do that, what happens in Python? Let us see that. Suppose if I want to store Ram inside this student at is a special symbol which I have used. Whether it is a valid declaration or not, we can observe. So let me execute this. If I'm trying to execute this or if I'm trying to create that variable where the variable name is having a special symbol, it is throwing an error. You can observe that syntax error. That means special symbols are not allowed inside the variable names. You have to remember that it can consist of only underscore, numbers, and letters. You can start any of the variable name with alphabet, which I have already seen, and you can also start your variable name with underscore. For example, I'm giving the underscore student and I'll be storing some value to it. If I execute this, this is a valid declaration. So again, if I you can just check the value stored into it. It is the same value which you have given. That means it is a valid declaration. Suppose, can I start my variable with a number? Suppose if I'm trying to give 123 underscore student and I'm trying to store a value called as ram into it. If I do this, it is throwing me an error saying that you can't start your variable with a number. You can start your variable name with either letters or underscore. You can't start your variable with a number. So you need to remember that variables can start with letter or it can start with underscore. It can't start with a number, but it can contain numbers when you are starting either with underscore or a letter, and you can have any number of numbers inside that, but you can't start with a number. And one more thing which you have to remember here is these variables are case sensitive. So for example, if you create a variable called as student and store a value called as Ram into it. Similarly, if you create one more variable called as student where S is an uppercase and store a value called as Ram into it, and if you check whether both are same, student, if it is whether it is equal to one more variable called as student, that is absolutely true, it is saying, because the value which is stored into that is same. Suppose if I store to this student variable is completely different from this student variable, because if you execute this, the RAM is stored. Let me store one more value into it. For this particular, where S is an uppercase, I'll be storing a value called as Raju. Okay, if I'm storing a value called as, just give me a second, I'll store Raj into it. Now, if I execute this, if I print the value of capital S, it is consisting of Raj. Check the value of a lowercase letter student, which will be consisting of Ram. That means Python variables are case sensitive. That means what I wanted to say here is this uppercase, if you're starting with, if you're varying in a case, that means it will be a different variable. And if you are starting with a lowercase and if you are creating a variable, this is a different variable. Now let me compare both, whether they are equal or not, because they are storing the different values right now. If I compare both, it has to show false because the value stored into this particular variable is compared with the value stored into this particular variable. Since both variables are different, so it is giving false. So that means this is what you have to check. This is case sensitive. Whenever you are using the Python programming language, you need to be careful about your variable creation or variable declaration, because you need to be careful in creating them since it is case sensitive. One more thing, suppose here, wherever I have declared, I have used only one variable. Suppose if you are having multiple words for a variable names, how you have to use it. For example, instead of using it as student, suppose if I want to use something called a student underscore name. So when multiple words are there, like this student underscore name, here two different words, if you want to combine that and frame a single word in Python programming language, so you can just combine it by using the underscore and give a value to it. For example, if you're willing to give a value called as Ram, you can give value called as Ram, so that automatically it will be created. This is a valid declaration. If you type student underscore name, so you're going to get the value called as Ram. This is one way of creating a variable. That means whenever it is consisting of multiple words, you can just use underscore to combine the multiple words. This is what I wanted to say. Apart from that, suppose, can I use a space between the variable name? For example, is this valid? Student space name. If I try to assign a value called as Ram to it, is it valid? No, it is not valid. See, it is throwing me an error called as syntax error. It is throwing me an error called as syntax error because it is not a valid declaration in Python. Any of the variable should not have any of the variables should not have any of the variables should not have spaces. If they are consisting of any of the spaces, then it is not treated as a single variable because spaces are not allowed inside your variable names. You can observe here, spaces are not allowed. Let me clear the screen. Just give me a minute. I'll just clear the screen. Okay. So that means if you are typing like this, student space name and trying to store a value inside it, it is going to throw an error because syntax error, because spaces are not allowed inside your variable name. Variable name can't have spaces. If you are having the multiple words to be combined, you need to use the underscore. This is one way when you are using the underscore like this to combine multiple words. student underscore name if you are using and trying to store a value inside it. This is one way. This is absolutely true. If I print student underscore name, it is going to give me the value called as Ram. This is one way which we call it as snake case. So representing your variable names where two or more multiple words are combined with the help of underscore, we call it a snake case. Now, there is another way where you can use your lowercase letter of the first word and the second word starts with an uppercase and combine that word without any spaces or without any underscore. This is another way of declaration and you can store value to it directly. This is another way of representing. If you type that variable name now, it is a valid declaration. It has not thrown any error and it will be consisting of that value. Where the second word's first letter or the third word's first letter will be, apart from the first word's first letter, all other words first letter will be made as an uppercase and combined directly without any combination, lower cases or something. Directly it is combined. So that we are going to call it as Pascal case. Sorry, it is camel case. Suppose if I'm making the first words first letter as an uppercase and the second words first letter as an uppercase, any number of words which I am combining, that I'll be making it as an uppercases. That first letter of any words will be made as an uppercase and I'm combining without any underscores. If I'm doing like this is called as Pascal case. This is also one of the valid declaration. So now if I type this student name, you'll be getting the value. So that means this is another way of representing a variable when a variable is consisting of multiple words. This we are going to call it as Pascal case. So let me repeat it. This is called as where underscore, if you are tiling with an underscore or combining with underscore, which is called as snake case. If you are using the first letter of a first word as lowercase and remaining words first letter as an uppercase used for combining, then we call it as a camel case. Suppose if you are using every word's first letter as an uppercase, then we call that as Pascal case. So in our declarations or in our explanations further, so I'll be using this case. Can you name what exactly it is? It is called as snake case. So this is what I'll be using. That means I'll be combining multiple words with an underscore. So that means further in our lectures, we'll be using this particular examples or this kind of declarations for variables. Thank you. Further in our lectures, we'll be using this snake case only. And next, I'll be discussing about indentation. Thank you.